Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Khan, and today we're diving into a truly unsettling case. The story of Kristen Rossum. She had the potential to become a renowned scientist, but she chose a different path that led to a tragic end. Kristen Rossum, a chemistry graduate from San Diego State University, had a bright future ahead of her. Instead, she's now serving a life sentence at the Central California Women's Facility for a crime committed against her husband, Ralph Rossum. Kristen and Ralph had 3 children, and they were doing everything they could to ensure their kids had a promising future. The children went to prestigious schools, had personal tutors, and took part in various activities designed to nurture their talents. But Kristen, who was once a bright and hopeful individual, couldn't handle the pressure. She struggled to keep up with the demanding pace of life and sought escape in alcohol, which soon wasn't enough for her. Her escape soon turned into a dangerous dependence on methamphetamine, one of the most addictive and harmful drugs out there. Methamphetamine is notorious for causing paranoia, altering judgment, and inducing hallucinations. Kristen's behavior became increasingly erratic, and her detachment from reality was evident to her family. After a lengthy discussion, Kristen confessed to her parents that she had been battling an addiction to meth since high school, a devastating blow for a family known for their academic and professional success. After months of turmoil and conflicts with her parents, 17-year-old Kristen decided to leave home secretly and went on a holiday to Mexico with some friends. There, she met Gregory DeVette, a tall, handsome man who was 7 years older than her. Gregory seemed like a savior, and he took on the role of a supportive partner, helping Kristen turn her life around. His love and support helped her secure a job as a toxicology assistant at a local forensic department. Kristen's job allowed her to work closely with controlled substances, which, combined with her background in toxicology, gave her access to the very drugs she had struggled with. Despite her past addiction, Kristen excelled in her career, graduated from university with honors, and earned praise from her teachers and employers. She even received the Best Student Award, unaware that her passion for toxicology was linked to her own troubled history. Kristen's relationship with Gregory lasted for about 5 years, culminating in a grand wedding on June 5, 1999. Her parents adored Gregory and were relieved to see their daughter overcome her dependency and embark on a path toward a hopeful future. In March 2000, Kristen started a new job at the San Diego County Medical Examiner's office as a toxicologist. Her role involved analyzing body fluids to detect controlled substances, and Gregory was working in the biotechnology field. However, Kristen soon became bored with her routine and began seeking excitement elsewhere. She found it with a new colleague, Michael Robertson, who had recently been promoted to department head. Despite being married, Michael and Kristen couldn't keep their affair hidden for long. When Gregory discovered letters between Kristen and Michael, their marriage began to fall apart. Gregory tried to salvage their relationship, but Kristen was determined to end it. On the morning of Monday, November 6, 2000, Kristen was facing a turning point. Ready for work as usual, Greg was ill and stayed home. CHR Kist was very worried about her husband in the days following their separation talk. He had been lethargic and unusually calm. She informed his workplace of her husband's illness. She also visited him during her lunch break. Greg was asleep at 9:22 p.m. That same day, Christine called emergency services to report that her husband Greg was not breathing. He had most likely committed suicide because he was home alone. The woman cried into the phone and did not listen to the dispatcher instruction to examine the body and possibly administer first aid. Police officers and paramedics arriving on the scene at 10:19 p.m. pronounced Gregory Devler dead. He was lying on the bedroom floor with his torso exposed, surrounded by scattered rose petals. The room examination suggested that Greg most likely consumed a lethal dose of several empty vials of potent painkillers were scattered around Greg's body, and torn wedding photos were strewn across his bed. During her interrogation, Kristen revealed that she had told Greg about their separation just the night before. Reflecting on their short 17-month marriage, Kristen admitted she had rushed into it, and now regretted it. She felt Greg was too clingy and that she needed space. Greg's death was initially ruled a suicide due to the strong sedative drugs found in his system. Kristen signed the cremation papers, but Greg's family and friends were skeptical about such a sudden suicide. They hadn't noticed any significant changes in Greg's demeanor or mood, and he hadn't shared any marital troubles with them. Greg was known to be strongly opposed to controlled substances, so it was unthinkable that he would willingly use them. The family managed to halt the cremation and demanded an independent autopsy. Their persistence led to a new investigation into the possibility of homicide. The toxicology results revealed that Greg had an alarmingly high level of fentanyl in his system, a painkiller that's 150 times more potent than morphine. In addition, there were smaller amounts of clonazepam and trace amounts of oxycodone, also known as hillbilly heroin. The investigators speculated that, under the influence of clonazepam and other drugs, someone else might have administered the fatal dose of fentanyl to Greg. Kristen quickly became the prime suspect, given that fentanyl is not available over the counter and she had both the knowledge and access to such substances. When Kristen arrived at the police station for questioning, her emaciated appearance and erratic behavior suggested a long-term drug dependency, which she herself confirmed. On the day of Greg's death, Kristen's statements were inconsistent. Initially, she told paramedics that Greg had not taken any medication, but later she claimed he might have used oxycodone. At the hospital, Kristen told a nurse that Greg might have overdosed on oxycodone, a drug similar to heroin in its effects. It can relieve pain but also induces euphoria and depresses the respiratory system. Without prompt intervention, it can be fatal. The police considered the possibility of an accidental overdose involving cold medicine and oxycodone. In her conversations with the police, Kristen mentioned that Greg had been very distressed over their failing marriage, which led her to suggest he might have ended his own life. This avenue was explored further. On November 8th, a colleague of Kristen's, Russ Lowe, contacted the police with new information. He revealed Kristen's affair with her boss, Dr. Michael Robertson. This revelation shifted the investigation significantly. Evidence of Kristen's relationship with Dr. Robertson surfaced, including passionate emails and professional documents showcasing Dr. Robertson's expertise in fentanyl. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. It was suspected that Greg had become a threat to the lovers, as he knew about Kristen's secret drug use with access to the lab. Dr. Robertson had been covering for her. This suggested a premeditated crime. The challenge for investigators now was to gather concrete proof of this theory. During his interrogation, Dr. Robertson admitted to detectives that he was aware of Kristen's drug dependency. That time no charges were brought. Against the couple, they were both dismissed from their jobs for violating several rules during the investigation. Serious trouble for Kristen began in January when police raided her home, finding traces of drugs and paraphernalia she was arrested for the first time but was later released on bail. The investigation progressed as new information emerged. This included Kristen's diary. During its initial examination, investigators hypothesized that it was written by Kristen not for herself but for an external reader as a means of covering up and affirming her innocence while crafting the appearance of Gregory's perfect self-inflicted demise. On the day of her husband's death, she bought a rose in revealing lingerie, actions inconsistent with her distressed demeanor. Medical examination indicated that Gregory was unconscious for at least 6 hours before his passing, and his death could have occurred an hour or an hour and a half before it was confirmed. Additionally, a bruise around a needle injection site on the young man's arm was found. Its purpose and exe unexplained at Kristen's workplace. A shortage of the drug that led to Gregory's demise as well as other controlled substances was discovered. Police believed Kristen poisoned Gregory, administering fentanyl without his knowledge. The prosecution built its case on toxicological and medical data with enough circumstantial evidence. Kristen was arrested on June 25, 2001 and charged with first-degree murder after Spending 6 months in custody, she was released on bail. The first trial soon commenced. The prosecution's main theory was the motive for the homicide. They argued that she terminated Gregory because he threatened to tarnish her. The prosecution argued that Kristen, motivated by a desire to preserve her reputation by concealing her renewed drug use and affair with Michael Robertson, poisoned Gregory with fentanyl. Fentanyl is a potent synthetic opioid, reportedly 80 times stronger than morphine. It was suggested that Kristen first attempted to kill Gregory with clonazepam, but, when that failed, resorted to administering fentanyl. The prosecution also claimed that she staged the scene to make it appear as though Gregory had died by suicide, using torn pages from her diary, rose petals, and a wedding photo around his body. Kristen, holding a degree in biochemistry, was alleged to have used her expertise in drugs and chemistry to orchestrate Gregory's death. The prosecution further argued that Kristen aimed to mislead her colleagues at the medical examiner's office by hiding information about fentanyl, but was unsuccessful in substituting the toxicological results before Gregory's autopsy was completed. On November 6th, Kristens Day was scrutinized. She reported Gregory's absence from work early in the morning, then went to work herself. Colleagues saw her crying in Michael's office around 9 a.m., and the apartment building manager noted her return home at 12:10 p.m. Kristen was later seen purchasing a single red rose at 12:41 p.m., confirmed by credit card statements. She made several calls to Michael before Gregory's death. Dr. Brian Blackburn, the San Diego County medical examiner, testified that Gregory had been deceased for at least an hour before the paramedics arrived. He noted that Gregory developed early bronchopneumonia, a condition resulting from secretions accumulating in the lungs due to shallow breathing or unconsciousness. Blackburn also found a significant amount of urine in Gregory's bladder, suggesting he had been breathing poorly for 6 to 12 hours before his death. He concluded that someone in Gregory's state could not have arranged rose petals over himself. Blackburn stated that the clonazepam levels were not at an overdose level and were not lethal. Dr. Theodore Stanley testified that fentanyl is a potent and fast-acting pain reliever, with effects varying based on the administration method. The peak effect occurs 15 to 20 minutes after intramuscular injection and within 5 minutes after intravenous injection. Stanley indicated that fentanyl is rarely administered orally due to its partial destruction by the liver. Both Blackburn and Stanley could not definitively explain how fentanyl entered Gregory's system but suggested it was administered multiple times. The prosecution speculated that Kristen might have applied fentanyl patches to Gregory's arm while he was asleep, supported by the disappearance of 15 patches from her former workplace. The defense argued Kristen's innocence, claiming Gregory self-administered fentanyl due to despair over family issues. Kristen testified that she found Gregory distraught on the morning of November 6th and called his employer at 7:42 a.m. to report his illness. She went to work but returned home around noon to have lunch with him. Kristen stated that when she came home at 8 p.m., she found Gregory cold and unresponsive, and called emergency services. During cross-examination, the prosecutor challenged Kristen's account, pointing out inconsistencies and her history of dishonesty. They suggested that fentanyl was an ideal poison due to its difficulty in detection, a fact Kristen would have been aware of from her professional background. Based on autopsy and toxicological findings, it was proven that Gregory was unconscious for approximately 6 to 8 hours, making it impossible for Kristen to have had lunch with him on the day of his death. The defense argued that, although Dr. Blackburn indicated the clonazepam levels in Gregory's blood were not lethal, the combination of oxycodone, an opioid, and clonazepam, a benzodiazepine, could have had a synergistic effect, potentially increasing their potency. They suggested that Gregory might have unknowingly ingested these drugs himself. However, how fentanyl was administered and why high levels were found in his system remained unexplained. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Kristen of first-degree homicide and special circumstances homicide due to the use of poison. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Kristen maintained her innocence and appealed the verdict. The appellate court discovered errors made by Kristen's defense team. The lawyers acknowledged that fentanyl caused Gregory's death, but failed to test autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites. This test could have confirmed whether fentanyl was ingested by Gregory or if it resulted from laboratory contamination after his death. If fentanyl had been found only in the samples and not in Gregory's body, the prosecution's theory would have been invalidated. Additionally, there was a break in the chain of custody of the samples. They were placed in a cardboard box marked as containing Gregory's body samples, but the containers were not sealed. The samples were intended to be delivered to the sheriff's office for transfer to an external lab, but due to the recipient's absence, the box remained at the medical examiner's office for about 36 hours before being sent to the forensic lab. This lapse raised concerns that anyone with access to the medical examiner's office could have tampered with the samples. Kristen believed there was a motive to tamper with the samples to frame her due to personal tensions among the staff. She argued that on November 8, 2000, Michael Robertson had informed a toxicologist that he had examined Gregory's stomach contents. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals concluded that Kristen's lawyers erred by not contesting the prosecution's claim of a fentanyl overdose. They should have tested the autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites rather than admitting to fentanyl poisoning. Despite this, the court did not overturn the verdict but remanded the case to federal court to determine if the defense's error could have affected the trial's outcome. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that federal courts must adhere to state court decisions regarding such appeals. Consequently, the appellate court decided against holding a hearing on Kristen's case, and her appeal was denied. She remains in custody. Michael Robertson, implicated as an accomplice, faced a criminal conspiracy complaint and a sealed arrest warrant. He currently lives freely in Australia, working as a forensic toxicology consultant. Should he return to the U.S., he could be arrested and held on a $100,000 bail. Gregory's family filed a lawsuit against the county for negligence, alleging that Kristen stole a lethal dose of drugs from the medical examiner's office undetected. In 2006, a U.S. court awarded them $147 million in civil damages. Kristen, a former toxicologist at the county medical examiner's office, was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in February 2003 for stealing drugs from the lab, using them to poison her husband, and staging a suicide scene in their apartment with rose petals. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more shocking and compelling stories ahead.